name is Wilbur Ingalls. I was born in Cuba, New York on October 3rd, 1922.
And tell us a little bit about life growing up in Cuba, New York.
I grew up on a farm in Cuba, New York. I was number 2 in a family of 7 kids. And I went to country school in Abbott's, New York, which is about a half a mile from our home, from the 1st to the 8th grade. Then went to Cuba High School in 1937 as a freshman. And in 1941, I graduated, and they had made it Cuba Central School. They built a new school in Centralized. And went to work that fall on the Erie Railroad in the signal department, and was there until I was drafted in service on December the 4th, 1942.
Can you tell me a little bit about your family life, what your responsibilities were? Did you get along with your brothers and sisters? Did you fight all the time? What did you do for fun?
No, we got along. Sure, you had fights, you always, family do. But we had farm, we had cows to take care of, sheep, chickens, pigs, and each one, as you growed up, had some chores to do. And one of the scars I got on my chin came when I was a kid, about 13 years old. I had a lamb that the mother sheep wouldn't take care of, so I got to have that lamb and bottle fed it. And the class was coming up from school one time, showing kids could show their pets to other kids, and we had a mean buck sheep in the lot. And this buck sheep, my lamb was in a hay feeder, and I was reaching over that hay feeder to get that lamb out, and the buck sheep hit me. And I got a nice scar on my chin from that.
What do you think was one of the greatest challenges you faced growing up in the Depression?
Well, probably, well, actually, in that time, where I lived, we didn't have electricity until 1937. And it was a challenge just to have water, stuff like that. The bathroom and outhouse out the back of the house. But then in 1937 we got power, and we pumped water then, and had electricity, of course. Inside bath. And then just the rigors of a farm family trying to grow up in the country.
During the later years, high school years in that, 1937, 1938, were you aware at all of the political events that were occurring around the world?
Well, somewhat, but probably didn't pay too much attention to them then. But kind of woke you up after the Japs hit Pearl Harbor. So, as you see, guys I graduated from school going in service, and some of them not coming back.
Tell us a little bit about your work on the, was it the Erie Railroad?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was in signal maintenance. I had to take care of signaling, crossing protection, and pole line. There was something going on every day. It was something different than working in the signal department than somebody working in a plant. You did something different every day.
Would it have been considered a good paying job?
I suppose at that time it might have been, when you get maybe $2.50 an hour or something like that. But I tell you, it was probably 1972 before I started getting over $5 an hour on a railroad. People think you're making big money. The people who were making big money were the ones that pushing the air brakes and blowing the horn.
Well, as you were working on the railroad, that would have been when? 1940?
1941 I started, yeah.
After the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor,
yeah.
The draft was initiated.
Mm-hmm.
Share with us a little bit about what life was like, what your thoughts were about your future.
Well, I even tried to enlist. And at the time they told me I had sugar. I ain't had sugar that didn't then have today. But when they drafted me, they didn't say about a month or so later, they didn't say anything about sugar.
So tell us a little bit about the process of being inducted into the Army. I understood you went down with a few friends. Did the Army make any promises to you at that time? And
Not really. No.
share with us a little bit about going into the Army.
Well, of course, we went to the county seat first, where they swore you in as to go into the Army, and then at the induction center, where I went was Fort Niagara, New York, which is about 60 miles north of where I live. And of course, that's when they said to volunteer for the airborne. The last time I volunteered for something. But anyway.
Tell me a little bit about what did they tell you about the airborne, and why did you choose to volunteer?
The only thing they told us is they're looking for people for the airborne, and they've got to be volunteers. And that's when I said they give you that slip of paper that says, you hereby volunteer to jump from an airplane in flight with parachute attached. We didn't know what they were talking about. It didn't take long to find out.
What was it then that motivated you to volunteer?
Just wanted to get into something. Yeah. Because most of the time back in them days, if you told them you was a telephone operator, they'd give you a pick and shovel. If you told them you was a truck driver, they'd put you someplace else. But I told them I'd work in the signal department. Didn't matter to them.
And then how did you go from New York to Toccoa?
I went by train.
Did you have to wait a few days before you were shipped out? Or?
No, probably just a couple of days, because I was I had landed in Toccoa, Georgia, the day after Christmas in 1942. So.
Tell us a little bit about your first thoughts at Toccoa.
we got to Toccoa, and we marched us up to camp. Then it wasn't too fun. One would have been 2 or 3 miles from town, the railroad station, up to camp. We set the barracks back down. They had them 30-foot mock towers. That's the first thing you went up. If you didn't go off that mock tower, you didn't stay there. I got up there, what am I doing here? But I went down there, cable. And the next thing we run Currahee Mountain. And if you didn't get up that, you didn't stay there. Well, there was a young lad that went with me from the same area I was in. Him and I carried one kid up that mountain that day to keep him in the outfit. And then it was running every day. And you'd go through, well, after you'd been there a while, they'd have a physical exam. And as you're going through the line, this major, he looked at me and he says, "Soldier, you passed all the qualifications, all the exercise and everything that's going on, but you got one thing against you, and that's your size." What about them guys back there? He said, "I got an idea. You make it, they want." Okay. That's where I stayed. But you got so you could run all day long. You can run all day. I mean, not dog trot. You can do it all day long. I wish I could today.
Did you ever meet Jumpy Johnson?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Tell me a little bit about him.
Well, we thought he was crazy most of the time.
Can you introduce him for me? Say, yeah, I had an opportunity to meet Jumpy Johnson.
Well, most of the time I met him, it was at a regimental parade or something like that. Not to be personal with him.
What I actually need you to do is kind of introduce the topic of Jumpy Johnson. So can you just share with us, using his name, something of what you thought about him?
I don't really know how to explain it. I'll tell you, he was tough, and he wanted you to be the same way. So you can remember, Robin might remember, if you couldn't lick 5 guys your own size, you wouldn't stay there. That's a fact.
Did you feel like he was a good leader or a poor leader?
I think he was a good leader.
Okay.
I think he made you tough, made you feel tough. Which I think is one thing he was well liked. As far as I'm concerned, he was a good leader.
Can you just say this statement for me? Can you say, I thought Colonel Johnson was a good leader?
I think Colonel Johnson was a good leader.
Thank you.
I think he was.
Okay. Are there any other recollections of Toccoa other than the running that you want to share with us?
No, not really, I guess.
From there you went?
From there we went to Fort Benning, Georgia. And Fort Benning, Georgia, at the time of training people for parachutists, were there 4 weeks. The first week was basic training. So when we landed there to take the jump training, we'd had 13 weeks of basic training. And we skipped that A stage, went to B stage. Well, the instructors there could be a private, but he was the boss. And then all your officers, each company, your officers went through right with you. And I can remember an instance, we were standing out there in front of this instructor. He's making us do small arm circles. And we got nothing on but trunks and a pair of shoes. So we're standing there going like this, and this instructor's arms are going down and down, and we're giving the raspberry. And Captain Krager, the company commander, was a guy about 5'8" from St. Louis, Missouri. He turned around his boys, let's give it to him. We give him the raspberry. And these instructors brought in another one, and we wore them both out. They said, well, we'll fix you guys. We'll take you for a run around Lawson Air Base. We laughed at him. He said, it's only 9 miles. He said, we do 9 miles before breakfast, and every morning with a full pack. So we started. Captain Krager leading us, and we're dog trotting along. This instructor, pretty soon he's lagging back. Captain Krager, what do you say, boys? Let's give him the raspberry. And so we did. We got probably within 500 yards of where we started. Captain Krager said, break rank and go for it. And we went on a dead run and sat there waiting for him to bring that instructor back. And that man apologized to us. He says, we have never had a bunch of men go through this training and take it like you have. He said, we've had 13 weeks of it. But he said, you guys have made it. Then we went to packing chutes for the jump. The first 5 chutes, we packed our own chutes. I mean, 3 men worked as teams, packing 3 chutes. Yeah. The first time we packed them 3 chutes, it took us about an hour and a half. After that, we packed 3 of them in about 15 minutes. Make your own, the first 5 you made, pack your own chutes for the jumps.
Walk me through from the morning that you woke up to do your first jump until you actually walked off the jump field. To the best of your recollection, you know, the order of events as they happened. You had breakfast, you were in the hangar, things of that nature.
The experience first is, what am I doing up here? You know, 'cause actually the first jump is like doing most anything the first time. You didn't know what really could happen. But after that, each one you figure out things that could happen. But I never had no trouble jumping. And most of the time I jumped either number 2 or number 3 man in a stick. No, gone.
You didn't have any apprehensions on the first jump?
No. You get more, every time you jump, you got a little more skitty, because you always, all the things that could happen.
Such as?
Well, maybe you break a leg, maybe the shoe don't open. Lots of little things. I never had no trouble jumping.
Did you get injured at all in training?
No, never.
Do you have any other recollections you want to share with us about Fort Benning?
No, not really.
What'd you get in trouble for?
We didn't get, well, we got in trouble with the 10th Armored Division in Fort Benning. They'd open up the PX and maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4:15 be closed, because the airborne and the tank corps were fighting, tear the place out when they closed it.
What are you fighting about?
Who's the best? This happened in Camp McCall too, when it was on, I think, the 4th of July of 1943. We were in town, there was a group of Hawaiians there. We were training as parachutists. They claimed they were training us. We got in a battle on the 4th of July in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I know the guy that threw the first punch was in the company. And when you got in trouble as a 501 man, you just hollered Geronimo. You had all kinds of help. And we cleaned that town up. Old Colonel Johnson restricted us to camp for 30 days with a black drape over the regimental card. He says, "You've been trained to fight, but wait, it means something." It meant something to us. We were licking them cusses.
Do you know what it was all about? The argument, as I understood it, was that they were going to teach us judo. We already knew. We thought we knew more than they did. That's where the fight started.
Well,
That's what I heard.
I heard it was supposed to be training them for, and we were training them, I thought.
Yeah.
All right, so what happened after Camp McCall?
Well, went on Tennessee maneuvers after McCall. Well, we were up there in Tennessee probably, I don't remember, 3 weeks. I know it wasn't too long.
No, I think it was about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We broke up
Yeah. Well, you went up there, of course, you went up there not knowing you was going to be opposed by somebody. You had what they call the Red Army and the Blue Army. Those guys in 501 are smart enough. We have armbands for both colors. we captured one of the outfits opposing us one night. We said, "What color are you?" And he said, "Blue." Not we were red or whatever. One day wrong, we had blue on too. And this one we captured was an major or something, and one of the Piper Cubs that they used for observation. It's an outfit. We got them captured, and we changed our man, put red on, said, "You're in trouble, we captured you." I don't know how many men there was, but they all, our referees, they gave us a pretty good credit for that move. But then we traveled at night. We're making a forced march, really, and it had been raining. And if you've seen movies of soldiers slogging through the mud, and then when we were that night, cross country, and they got so every 15 minutes, they were taking a break. And anybody in the airborne knows what it's like to go sleepwalking. You fall in the ditch, you wake up and keep going. But there was guys that fall in the ditch and go to sleep, couldn't wake up. And this Knowlton said to me, "Can you catch up with Captain Krager and tell him that the guys are dropping out like flies back here?" "I'll catch him if I can." I got up to Captain Krager and I said, "Captain, Lieutenant Knowlton says to tell you the guys are dropping out like flies every time we stop. He's picking them up. God damn it, I don't blame him a bit, I'd like to myself." Kept right on plugging. Then we were supposed to make a jump. Now my company didn't jump. I don't think anybody jumped down there. Because the wind was blowing, it was raining, and we were in the woods somewhere outside of Tullahoma, Tennessee, waiting to get the planes to jump. Cold, raining, wet. I'm about scrounging around in a railroad track close by. says, come on, you guys, I know something that'll burn good. Old railroad ties. And we got railroad ties, but then we camouflaged them with regular wood. You know, when railroad tie goes to burning, you can't help but know it's got to be a tie. The old tree is still smoking. They finally said, no more ties. I said, hell, they made good fire. But one thing that happened though on a move one night is the 6x6 I was riding on, part of my company was in, hit a bridge, a steel bridge, and blew a gas tank. And I happened to be sitting right on the tail end of that truck, and I rolled off backwards, and all I could see was a guy's arms and legs going out of that truck, getting away from the truck caught fire. And I remember guys hollering, there was a creek, hollering help. And one of the guys, Francis McNamara from Binghamton, New York, was hollering. And the creek bank was quite steep, and he couldn't get a hold to get out. And I reached down to get a hold of him, and it looked like he'd been skinned, his hand. So I pulled him up out of the creek and got the medics. He says, how's my face look? I said, your face ain't hurt. His face looked about like his hand. Where his coat was, his hands was peeled already. He'd been caught in that fire. We had 2 or 3 burned quite bad. He never did come back to company. Yeah, after I guess they got him cleared up after the burns. He went to the 508 and the 17th Airborne or something. And I never saw him again.
All right, and tell us about your POE.
Well, of course, we went by train from Camp McCall to Boston, Mass, Camp Miles Standish. And we kept wondering where we were going because you didn't know until you was on the water. And get on those boats, we called the victory ships. It's like being on the cork in a big puddle. And the first day out from Boston Harbor, boy, I wonder how I'm going to stand this ocean ride. But I got my sea legs pretty much the first 3 or 4 hours. And some guys hit the bunks and never got out of them. Couldn't. But it was rough. It was rough. We were 13 days going across the boat with the George W. Goethel. And we tried to train a little bit with rifles and calisthenics out on the deck. I said they're going to ruin our life. That's saltwater. They're going to ruin them. And they finally ditched the rifle bit. And then they quit the calisthenics and it all got so rough. You couldn't stay on the deck. As I recall it, there was aircraft carriers in that convoy, and when them props on them aircraft carriers come out of the water, it was rough. We were on them corks. But the thing that was most interesting is the galley, they called it, they had a big tray, metal tray that you'd set your plate of stuff on. You would run that way to catch it, the next thing you could be going back that way to get it. And they told you to eat, even if you had to poke it down. If you're going to throw it up, you got something that'll come out about as a dry heap.
What did you do to entertain yourself while on the passage to England?
Wasn't much you could do. Wasn't much you could do. Wasn't no room to do anything. Guys would play cards or something, but the thing that bothered me most, if they got a submarine scare, they put you down in the hold. I said, that's an awful place to be. You're going to get hit by a torpedo or something. You ain't got a chance. But other than that, crew didn't bother me too much.
Did you hear the depth charges?
I don't recall hearing any.
Every night.
Yeah, but I don't remember hearing them anyway. You know.
So after 13 days, you reached England. I'm assuming this is
We went into Glasgow, Scotland. And then we were, I don't know if we went by train or truck down across where we went in England. But that's how we got down in England.
What were your first impressions of England?
Well, not really too much. Only I think the broad rooms are keeping it from sinking. Because there was water supplies under every tree.
Can you tell me a little bit about Lambourne?
Not too much. I didn't go to town that much. I mean, you got to camp once in a while, maybe. I got to London a time or two, but other than that, I didn't go out. I didn't drink, hadn't, but didn't smoke till after I shot at the first time in combat. And I said, I'm going to die, I might have a cigarette and something to drink. So it's like, got into Normandy, we didn't carry water in our canteen, we carried wine. And water spoiled them.
Tell me a little bit about camp life in Lambourne.
Where I was, built it in horse stable. And horse stall, maybe a couple of guys in the stall. And a little old stove, pot belly stove. Tried to fuel it with coke. Almost impossible to keep it burning. You had to have a fireman on duty every minute to keep the fire going, but it wasn't too bad then. Around the camp, that's what he was always doing, training and marching and hiking and one thing and another. I think it was most interesting, the buses, they would take us out to a field for firing range. They were fueled by manure. And we were going up some of the hills, we'd have to get out and push them buses up the hill. And I remember firing on the firing range at well, they have that firing range, is it? Yeah, I can't remember the name of it now. But the thing that was most interesting was the jackrabbits. If you got somebody who could hit a jackrabbit with a rifle, you got a man that can shoot. And I'm one of them. And they finally, heck, we had to pay for the jackrabbit. Because the English people used them for meat, which they were good meat. But we said, if any man can hit one of them jackrabbits with a rifle, he's got to be a good shot. And I could hit him. I could hit him.
Is there anything left of him after you hit him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right, so pretty soon they moved you to a marshalling area. Share with us about the experience of going into the marshalling area and then what you learned there.
Well, you learn pretty much the topographical area where you're supposed to land in Normandy. And other than that, you didn't get outside of it. But you were studying them maps, stand maps, whatever, every minute, and got fed. You had what I call the fat before the kill. That's the way back on the farm we got ready to butcher hog, we'd put the corn to them to fatten them fast. And that's what they were doing. You could get steak 3 times a day if you wanted it. They were fattening you for the kill.
Can you make some kind of statement for me such as, and then they moved us into the marshalling areas?
I don't know how I could answer that question for you.
I just need a transitional statement from you for the story that you were training in Lambourne, shooting jackrabbits, and I need you to tell me from there they moved us into the marshalling areas.
Well, probably most thing is wondering where we're going to go, when. We pretty much had an idea of when, but what it was going to be like. You sure didn't know what it was going to be like. But when we went out to the plains on the night of June the 5th, we said, they ain't going to jump us tonight, this weather like it is. They're crazy. And it's like they said, they postponed it for 24 hours. When I said, we saw it in them, we all made bet that no matter what the weather was, the next day we'd be going, which we did. And the thing that I remember most is we flew over the channel that night. You could look down, and it looked like you could walk across the boat on that channel. They said, well, we'll have a lot of help in the morning. And then they hit fog and ack-ack.
Let me pause you just for one moment. Let me take you back a little. Do you remember what your specific objective was in the briefing in the marshalling area?
Yeah, it was supposed to be, if I remember right, around Tinconda Mountain, in that area. But we sure didn't hit it.
And tell me a little bit about what your specific responsibility was to be.
Well, a scout. Was a scout.
Can you make this statement for me? My job was a scout, and my responsibilities were?
My job was to scout, and that's you can find out where enemy troops are. In other words, it's like being a dog on a bird hunting mission. And there was two of us worked as scouts, first and second scout. If we come to a road section, if I was leading, I'd make a scouting trip up this side road, and if I found nothing, the other man take the lead, and he'd go to the next, even if it was a side road or something, or a hedgerow or something. We worked in pairs.
And explain for me, if you would, what type of precautions do you take so that you're not detected by the enemy, or how do you avoid not being killed yourself?
Well, you just try to help keep from being detected. You try to move with all the caution you could, and staying down low, and hope you didn't run into something you could handle. I was in Normandy. I saw the glider come in that General Pratt was killed on. And when I saw that glider coming in, I said, they ain't gonna make it. And it was headed for a hedgerow with big trees in it. And the glider disintegrated. And that's when I found out that General Pratt was on it. And John Bacon was another one that was right there. He was in 8th Company, and I'm G Company. In that several years, we were talking about Pratt's glider coming in. And I said, John, I saw his glider come in. He says, was you there too? I said, yeah. Right close by where it came in. He said, I'll be darned. Yeah.
Will you just make the statement for me? And then we move to the marshalling areas. Just say that, if you can say it.
Then we moved to the marshalling area.
Okay. Now, let's go back. You loaded into the planes. Will you tell me a little bit about the equipment that you were carrying?
Well, I carried M1 and 2 or 3 days bandoliers of ammunition. He was carrying rations for 3 days, K-ration, map, some had map, squad leaders or something, but, and hand grenades. That's about the limit of what he's carrying. He's almost carrying as much weight as you weighed.
You know, something else I thought of. Well, can you share with us why you think they selected you to be a scout?
I have no idea. No idea. No.
Were you good at map navigation? And
I was good at direction. I didn't need a compass. You could tell northeast, west, south, and east, west. I didn't need a compass.
how could you do that?
I don't know. You just. And I remember, this is after the war was over, I belonged to the upstate chapter in New York State. And we used to have a yearly picnic at Seneca Lake in New York State, it's one of the Finger Lakes. And they always had plans of something to do. And one of these reunions, they had three men on a team and give you a compass course to stick from where we were having the picnic to pick out a target or something for a target. So I had 3 people going to the bee and I led. The guys running the show said, you want a compass? I don't need no compass. I said, our instructions are to go 180 degrees northeast to north or something like that. There's no problem, just go off this way somewhere. They'd have a target for you to identify. Them guys said, I don't know how you do it. I said, well, just nature, just natural.
Okay, you were just, go ahead. And do you need some more water? I can fill that. Okay. You were sharing with us a little bit about the flight over the channel. You saw the boats. Continue on with that story. Can you describe for us perhaps what the feeling or the atmosphere was like in the plane at the time as you were, and then go over as in specific details as you can recall the actual jump out, where you landed, what the first things you were, did you see people, things of that nature?
First place in the flight over there, once we hit the French coast and hit the fog in Akac, we went down on treetops. We went out of the fog and it was moonlight, which was supposed to be that night, half moonlight. And when they stood us up to jump, I'm standing close to a window. I don't need a parachute, treetops are right there. And the pilot stuck that tail at her nose of that plane up in the air. He said he got it 500 feet. He said, get out of here. Man, I thought, oh boy. The chute might not even get open. But the chute's open, but you hit off hard. But at the same time, G Company lost 2 planes. Them the 2, I just showed you that chart. When 5's flying in a formation of these, 3 in a formation, you've got a front one here and here. Them planes, I was in this one. And them planes was both on this side. One on this side, I see them both go up. The one on the right side blew up first, but you couldn't see a piece of it. But the other one, the 3 men got out of, got hit, and that plane nosed for the sky, and 3 men that were in up toward the cabin of that plane managed to fall out the door as they went by it. That's all they got out of it. And the machine gun bullets rip in your plane. You jump out, and I swear that I could have walked down the tracer bullet. And I've never liked the 4th of July celebration since. Never. But I got on the ground, but I hit, my chute went into an apple tree. But I was on the ground. But we had them harnesses, you remember the snapping. Once they tightened up, you had an awful time getting them loose. And Colonel Johnson said that night, he said, you get out of them chutes any way you can if you have to cut them off. Well, I'm rolled over on my back, and first thing I hit, but something snapped. Oh man, I broke a leg. So I'm going, you know, that wasn't working yet. Yeah, that one's working. That was working. And I hear somebody coming. Well, I can't get the rifle out yet. Wow, what am I going to do? You know, I have the trench knife the Army issued it. And I had a hunting knife I carried from home, 1 in each boot. And I grabbed them 1 in each hand. And I popped a cricket. There's one of my own men, one of my own men in the squad. Boy, I wasn't long getting out of a parachute. I just doop, doop, and was out. And that's hurt, because you lost. A lot of guys got broken legs at night, or arms. Yep. And Captain Krager was hit coming down. And he got hit in an arm, I don't know which one. But he stayed there for about 2 days. He didn't want to leave. And the medic said, if you don't leave, you're going to lose an arm. And then they took him out, went back to England.
So what are your recollections of that, well, actually I should say early morning, while it was still dark?
It's pretty nasty. You didn't know what you're running into. You didn't know where anybody was. And then finally you maybe get 4 or 5, 6 guys together, nobody from the same company. So you do what you had to do, try to get organized. And there was one time, you've heard that story, there was so few commanded by so many officers. Yeah.
Did you having a natural sense of navigation, did people tend to follow your idea of where you thought you should go?
Yeah, pretty much. But we had to work together for different companies while you tried to say trying to get to the objective, but some of it pretty far from the objective.
Now, when did you realize that you'd been misdropped?
Probably in the first few hours you was on the ground. Because you're nowhere near any of the familiar pictures you studied on a train map. No, nothing.
So what was your thoughts at that time to try to do what?
Well, you just try to get to your objective. Whatever it happened to be, whether it was a bridge you're supposed to take care of or protect, or some other objective. But
Do you remember what your objective was?
I don't. No.
Yeah, okay.
No.
So did you run into any firefights that evening?
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
Can you describe that experience for me?
One of the firefights, well, it's probably the next day, and we run into, we got pinned down on top of a knoll, and we were pinned down right close shoulder to shoulder pretty near, and we were on a road. This road run through a cut, and the Germans had come up with waving white flags, and like they was going to surrender. And I don't, you remember Major Roberts? The man about 6'6". Nobody liked him anyway, but no, that's beside the point. But he appointed 6 guys to go across and take command of them Germans who was waving a white flag. We said, Major, you're making a mistake. That some of them cops got machine guns fastened to their backs. And that's what happened. Major Roberts got spun like a top. Like he lived, I guess. But I said, too bad I didn't kill him. And when that happened, all the rest of us, we were on that side of the road. And the crowd beat it. And they're running across them causeways that we didn't have nothing to reach them with. No artillery, nothing. Them ones were no good to you 200 or 300 yards, 500, 6,000 yards away. We just watch them go. Horses ready to hook on carts, horses ready to hook on wagons, and they're gone. Probably was a couple of days before they actually got together really as companies and work as a control unit. And then it was running hedgerow to hedgerow.
Can you explain to me a little bit about how you go through a hedgerow?
Some of them you tried to crawl through them, but you could get through them. But that was awful. It was awful. You might think you're going to stick your head into an 88 if you crawl through one of them hedgerows. But it didn't happen. My best buddy was George Jordan, and he was killed in Normandy on the 13th of June. We were going up, we just went through a kind of an opening in a hedgerow, and I was going up one side of it, he was going up the other. And a shell came and hit on his side of it. They cleaned him at that time, and I thought, oh boy. So I thought to myself, if I live to get through this and got kids of my own, my son's going to be George Richard. Just named after that man. So it's kind of tough.
In the period of June 6th to June 12th, in that time frame, do you have any recollection? The 501 essentially accomplished 2 objectives initially. One was clear the causeways for the infantry to come in off the beach, and the other was to go down to the locks, south, well, close to Carentan.
Yeah.
Do you remember, were you involved in either of those actions?
Well, involved in the fight for Carentan, which is pretty nasty.
So that was after you'd come together as a
Yeah.
unit, as a company. Where were you coming out of? Bearville? Is that where they were based, or
It was in the vicinity.
in the vicinity?
But that was just a couple of drop zones. You had, I can't think of the names of them.
St. Combe-Dumont was one of your objectives.
Yeah.
Is that where they have what was
Saint-
called Dead Man's
Saint-
Corner? No?
St. Mary Gleason. I think actually ours was supposed to be somewhere around St. Mary Glees, but we never hit that area. And,
After you came together as a unit, even if we can't remember the names of the town, tell us a little bit about the experience, what you shared with the other guys, and then what your thoughts were as you were given the objective of capturing Carentan.
I don't even know how to answer that. You thought you would, of course, was always that you're going to still be going and breathing the next minute most of the time. But
Let me redefine the question a little for you, because before you went into Normandy, I believe you were told you were going to be there for 3 to 6 days, basically help secure the beachhead, and then they're going to pull you out.
yeah,
And now they're telling you you're going into Carentan. So
yeah.
the question is directed more towards what were your thoughts about the leadership, about your role of having to go on the offensive now rather than going back to England, and then can you just carry on through that into your experiences in that battle?
I lasted while we were taking Carentan, and I think we were going east out of Carentan when I got clobbered. And it finished me up in Normandy. And what happened, where they went from then on, I don't know.
Other soldiers have shared with me that they rarely could actually see a target in combat. You rarely saw the Germans. It was more quick little flashes or movements. Do you recall seeing the enemy?
Yeah, you can see them. The only thing you couldn't see that they had was their snipers. And their powder was smokeless. And you had an awful time trying to find a sniper. You had to watch it for twigs on a tree or leaves on a tree, miss moving or something like that. Yeah. But you could spot them. You could spot them. Yeah.
Now, in the Battle of Carentan, where you were injured, can you kind of share with us what you were doing at the time the shelling came in and your recollections of being wounded?
I think we were trying to move. When I got one, we were moving east out of Carentan. Of course, they were firing everything they had at us to try to stop it. And in fact, I got hit twice within about 10 minutes. Because I'd had a chunk taken out of the leg, and that ain't gonna stop me. But one of the guys in my company was putting a first aid pouch on that leg wound. Just took a hunk of meat off. When I got hit, laying on my belly, that piece of shell fragment hit me in the back of my right shoulder and kicked me from here to that wall. And the guy that was over me, the piece went through a wrist. Jack Langham went through his wrist. At the same time, well, that wound up my combat.
And what were your thoughts at that time, that you'd broken your arm? Or?
I thought I lost it. I thought I lost the arm. And I was telling you before that they told me to get for an aid station. Well, I don't know where an aid station is. And I'm carrying an M1 and a Tommy gun. And I thought, which one am I going to hang on to? So I'm carrying the Tommy gun. I can run that one-handed. And if I need to, I can fire a lot of lead. And I started to go, and we got some more shells come in, and I dove into a bomb crater. I couldn't get out of it. And some guy in a Jeep came along. I don't remember if he was airborne or who he was. And he said, "What's the matter, trooper? Can't you?" I said, "No, I can't get out of here." He reached down and took a hold of my right arm. "Don't take that, you'll have just my arm." He got me up with the other one. He took a look, he said, "Oh my God." Put me on the Jeep. He said, "I know where the aid station is." We bailed out across country to that aid station. He said, "You stay right there on that Jeep till I get some medics out here." And I don't know who they were, but it was a doctor. I don't remember if he was a captain or a lieutenant. Come out. They put him on a stretcher. And he took a look at my wound. He says, "I'll be right back." That's when I told him he bought a quart bottle of wine. He said, "Drink it." But I drank it, every bit of it. I have no feelings for a while afterward.
Where'd you get the Thompson?
Stole it out of a glider, piled up glider, picked it up out of one. Because I tried to get them to issue me a Tommy gun before we went into combat as a scout, but they wouldn't. I said, okay, I'll get one. I got one the next day. I don't crash gliders.
Tell me a little bit about the living conditions in Normandy.
Well, they weren't too good. You used up what K rations you had with you, then getting the meal was pretty skimpy. They tried to get meals to you, but you didn't always get there. So, didn't really have an awful lot to eat.
You weren't around where they were killing cows to eat.
Well, it probably was. Anything else, pigs and the chickens.
Now you'd come through training. You were a highly motivated group of men. Now you've experienced war.
Yep.
Did your feelings change at all?
Oh, not really, not really. The only thing is, say like you're in combat, you wonder if 1 minute you're going to be taking a breath the next. But I will say this, that if anybody was ever in combat and said they weren't scared, I didn't want them anywhere near me. Nowhere near me. Because there had to be something wrong with them, they were scared.
Did you feel as though you had been properly trained for your mission?
Yeah, yep, definitely.
Did your feelings towards the enemy change?
Any enemy that got within sight of my rifle was done. It's all like, well, they're shooting at me. But the first thing I thought was, what am I doing that people that shoot people the same color? But as soon as they took one of your buddies out beside you, you change your tune. It's either going to be them or me, and if I can help it, it's going to be me.
So you were wounded. What happened to you after the fellow picked you up in the Jeep and they did the surgery?
I was shipped down at the Channel coast, waiting for a ride to come back across the channel. And they put us on stretchers down there, and we would get strafed. It was a hell of a place to be. Nothing to fight with. Just hoping to get on a boat, which he did. I got on a merchant marine ship, and a CB on it took care of me when I got on the boat. The trooper, you've been hurt. Yeah, I have. And he said, how'd you like to clean up? I said, I have an awful time cleaning up. He said, I'm going to help you. And he took a bath in a bucket of water. That's when he asked me, he said, how'd you like something to eat? And I sure would. And he said, how would you like eggs? I said, what kind of egg? He said, fresh ones. I said, what are they? I'd seen the fresh eggs ones you got in England. No powdered stuff. I said, yeah, I'll take 6 to start with. He said, how about a bowl of oatmeal? I'll take some of that too.
Did you really get 6 eggs?
Yes, I did. A bowl of oatmeal. That's I was telling you, they put us in an English collection station. It was in an English hospital. And the English people kept the wounds dressed and cleaned, but they didn't do nothing to them. You know, I had my arm was strapped down. But the thing I thought, I'd hate to lay there and starve to death. They had an American major taking care of getting American troops out and into an American hospital. And this major, after I'd been there 2 or 3 days, says, soldier, how you doing? I said, well, they're keeping my wound dressed. But I said, it's awful to lay this bed and starve to death. He said, what do you mean? They ain't getting nothing to eat. I says, breakfast time you get a half a slice of toast and a cup of their tea. At lunchtime you get a half a sandwich and another cup of their tea. Then lunchtime or supper time you might get a piece of potato and very seldom any meat and another cup of tea. I said, I hate to starve to death right here in this bed. But they finally got me to American Hospital. It was a 250th General Field Hospital. And the nurse that took charge of me when I first got there was a Japanese American. And the first thing she said to me is, "Are you hungry?" Am I hungry? Yeah, I am. She says, "Well, the chow time is, supper time is over, but I'm going to the kitchen and see if I can't ration you up something to eat." Which he did. He brought me back a plate full of stuff. And I ate it. And she said, "If I'd ate the plates if I could have." She came back and said, "You were hungry." I said, "Yeah, I was." And now she says, "You got to stay in this bed." I said, "Okay." But ward boy, I says, "Where's the latrine?" I got to go up to the latrine. The next building. And he said, "You're supposed to be in bed. Not long as them 2 feet carry me, I ain't going to be." And they had a captain, doctor on that ward. There was a guy that was made for it. Because he was always joking, always smiling, and he was just making you feel good all the while. And the first time he looked at me, I said, "Doc, you going to be able to save that arm?"
Can you say that, when you touch the microphone, I get a big banging noise.
Oh, okay.
Start again. What did he say to you?
So I said to that doctor, I said, "You going to be able to save my arm?" He said, "I think so." I said, "Okay." So he operated on me, and I'm in a cast from here to my collar. This arm stuck off up here like this. And the thing that hurt the worst was the cast. And I thought my arm was, oh, it was awful, hurt. So I thought, well, if I keep my arm there, I guess I can stand it. I can undo my leg here. And after about 4 days, he come in. He said, "Trooper, I want you to tell me the truth. Is that cast hurting you?" "Not a bit." Not a bit. He come back after a while and he said, "Now I want you to tell me the truth." I said, "That cast is about half killing me." He says, "Where's it hurt?" "It's hurting in my arm, my elbow." The way it's cocked off up in the position you got it in. He said, "Well, let's see, it's been about 4 days. If we take that cast off of you and put your arm in a sling fastened to your stomach, you try not to move that shoulder, you got her." And they took me out of that cast and kept me in this arm fastened down. And didn't move no shoulder, but I was probably 3 weeks before they took the slings off. Now, he said, "You start straightening that arm out." Yeah, I had an awful time for a while. And then every day, drop it down, drop it down, drop it down, then try to keep it, start swinging it. Then they put you up against the wall and you keep running that hand up the wall. Get your shoulder up over your head. You could get it up over your head. I got till I can move it. In the afternoon, I'd go out on the field, recreation field, and playing ball, one thing or another. And I thought, well, heck, I might just want to play ball. And I thought, well, I picked up and played softball. I picked up a ball throw overhand, and I thought, boy, I wrecked that shoulder. Yeah, I tore everything loose again. But I didn't. But I learned I don't throw overhand no more. They still don't. Still can't. But after the war was over, after the war was all over, VE Day, the 501 was broke up. Now, this letter that they put out was our file to come. The 501 was not activated back in the U.S. The 501 was deactivated right there in France in probably September 45. It says that sheet you got with our file today, it says they were deactivated in the States. It was not so. Because I went to the 502. And I went to the 502 headquarters company. They put me in the demolition platoon. I said, man, what a place to put me. I'm a rifle company man. because he knew how to make a Molotov cocktail. You carried CO2 with you, or C2 charges. And the guy running this demolition platoon was a snot. He was a second lieutenant. But I had two guys that come into that demolition platoon who were replacements when we were down on the all-station range in my squad, and had had a lot of demolition.
Can you say that again? And it had a lot of demolition?
They had two replacements that come to my squad that had a lot of demolition. They said, Wilbur, we'll help you with some of the more technical points of demolition. That cuss isn't going to ruin you. He ain't going to ruin me. I'm going to ruin him. So we're out. I have trouble now swimming on my belly, let alone on my back. So we're in the swimming pool trying to set underwater charges. This lieutenant says, Sergeant Ingalls, get on your back. And he says, I'm going to come in the water and put you on your back. Not me, Lieutenant. Because if you come in this pool, try to put me on my back, one of us ain't coming out. And it ain't going to be me. Because if you try to put me on my back, I'll drown you. I crawled out of that pool and went to the CO of that company. He said, Sergeant, what's the trouble? I says, if you don't want to lose a second lieutenant, you better get me out of that demolition platoon. He says, why? I said, if that man comes in that pool and tries to put me on my back, I'll drown him. He said, Sergeant, you ain't the first one. Get your bags, and I'll send you to another company. And I don't remember which one I went to. But I got to this company, and the lieutenant says, company commander, sit down, Sergeant, the war is over. I'm okay. He says, by the way, can you play softball? I said, yeah. But I can only throw underhand. I can't throw overhand. He said, can you pitch? I said, yep. I played softball the rest of the summer, rest of the fall. But I had quite a journey trying to get home, or get back across the water. But they finally shipped us out to, went to the 291st Infantry Division, 70 Infantry Regiment, 75th Division, for the shipment home. And I'll tell you, there's probably 1,000 of us. And every one was almost airborne, 82nd or 101st, and most of us not coming. And we went to a camp up out of Le Havre. They said we're supposed to sail home on the Queen Mary. We went in this camp, and they said, you won't be here more than 36 hours. 2 weeks and 36 hours later, we're still there. We're getting a little perturbed. So they send us from Le Havre to Marseille. So down in Marseille, we're setting up out of that harbor up out of Marseille, France, and you can see all the boats going and coming. And they tell us the same story. So we were there. 2 weeks later, we're still there. So we had one guy that was a tech sergeant and spokesman for us, and one morning the camp headquarters about 3 miles from where our tent city was. It's getting cold. It's November, no heat. And we got out one morning with formation, and we paraded up to that camp headquarters. The camp headquarters were temporary buildings on timbers, wood shacks. And the tech sergeant pounded on the door. The major opened the door. Don't want to know what we want. Just want to go home. He says, your boat hasn't come in yet. What do you mean a boat hasn't come in? There's boats going in and out of that harbor every day. And the thing that bothered us most, thinking black outfits, is going home. No. He says, why ain't we on one of them boats? Well, he says, you go back to your area, and by 1 o'clock, I'll have word to you. Okay, we agreed to it. And 1 o'clock, we hadn't heard nothing. Come 2 o'clock, we hadn't heard nothing. 2:15, we was hiking up there again. So this time we get around that building, shoulder to shoulder, we picked that building right up off the ground. This is high as we could pick it. The tech sergeant tapped on the door. The 2-star general opened the door. His eyes got bigger than lamps. He says, what's the trouble? The tech sergeant said, General, we want to go home. And we better be going now. If you don't want to go with the building, you better get out of it. because this is the first one we're going to turn upside down. Then we're going to wreck this camp. Set her down, boy. Set her down. If I look out over that crowd of people I see, all I see is 82nd and 101st Airborne. He said, I believe you guys, after what you've been through. She set her down. Go back to your outfit, and we'll have word to you in a little while. 4 o'clock that afternoon, we was marching onto a boat. Come back across the pond.
Let's go ahead and finish out the homecoming part of the story. So where did you land?
We went into Newport, Virginia, Newport News. We were supposed to go into New York. Thought, oh boy, I'm going to see the Statue of Liberty one time. But something happened going across. They put us in Newport News. We had a beautiful ride. We went across the South Atlantic, and it was beautiful. When we were 11 days coming back across.
And were you decommissioned, or what's the word?
Discharged?
Discharged
Uh-huh.
from the Army there? Or?
I went from Newport News to Fort Dix, New Jersey, and was discharged from Fort Dix, New Jersey on December the 4th, 1945.
And how'd you get home?
Train. Yep.
Share with us from when you were discharged to seeing your family for the first time.
Quite interesting, I guess you have to say. Because we came, at the time I came home, they had what they called a 90-day phase out. You got paid so much for 90 days before you went back to work or went to school. And I thought once I ought to go to college or something. I said, I don't feel like going to get stuck in a college room after what I've been through. So in January of '46, I went back to work on the railroad and stayed there until I retired in November of 1983.
Let's go back in the story to you were in England, recovering from your wound in Normandy. Where did they send you to after the American hospital?
Back to the outfit in Lamborn, just before Holland. And I reported for duty, and Captain Krieger was back. Otis Tippett was the first sergeant. When I pounded on the CP door, Tippett says, "Captain, look who's back." And Captain Krieger was like going home.
Good captain. What was his name again?
Bernard Krieger.
Krieger. He was the one that got shot in the arm.
He got, yeah. And later got killed in Holland.
What made him a good captain?
He was honest and fair to his men. That man, as long as I knew him, I never heard him cuss a man. But you could tell he was disgusted at somebody, just his face. Now one of the things that Johnson had ordered, that if you had a man get hung up in a tree, you don't help him. Because if you're on a combat mission, you keep going till you accomplish your mission. Never mind that man, somebody else will get him down. But Captain Krieger got hung in a tree down there in North Carolina one day with his feet that far off the ground and couldn't get on the ground. Everybody's going by him. Hi, Captain. Keep right on going. That ended that order in our company. Captain Krieger, if I ever see one of you people go by some one of your buddies that's hung in a tree, I'm going to court-martial you. He says, you don't know how stupid I felt. That day, 6 inches off the ground, and I couldn't get my feet on the ground. He said, that don't happen in this company. He says, you help that man out, you may need him. Well, that's the kind of a guy he was.
So you're back in Lamborn with your company, and how do you hear about Holland?
I don't really remember how we heard about it. We figured there was something going on, but we didn't know where it was going to happen until we were actually, well, probably in the marshalling area. And going to Holland. Holland was a beautiful jump. And we jumped into daylight. We got a little ack about 15 minutes before we got to drop zone, but we landed on the target. And it was the next day, and therefore we usually run into in German. And it was a beautiful jump. The only thing that happened after we landed and got organized, making a move, I was in the assistant squad at that time, the squad leader, and 4 of us got put out as a flank guard for a battalion move. And the connecting file, if the battalion, they made a left move, and we didn't get word of it. So we figured pretty soon we're 6 of us out in the middle of no place in Holland by ourselves. And the 4 guys that we had with us were replacements. Well, it's just like we were the first time we went into combat. You don't know how you're going to act. And we were thinking the same thing about these 4 guys. What are they going to do? So we keep moving. We're staying out in the field. We're off the highway. Pretty soon here comes a German tank blistering down that highway. These kids, the tank commander was standing up standing out the turn, and these guys, let's shoot at me. Don't shoot at that. We can't fight that tank. We let them go. And pretty soon a staff car come down through, 4 or 5 officers, I suppose, in it. Let's shoot at them. Yeah, let them go. So we keep hiking along. We come to this town. I'm not sure, but I think it was St. Odin Road, Holland. That's where we wound up at. So we hit the street. And we put one of these new guys out kind of as a scout. Keep tracking. We were moving down the street. And I think I spotted Germans before he did. And we disappeared in the back alley. And we think, what are we going to do? We don't know how many there is or how big an outfit it might be. And we're just trying to decide what to do. And I said, damn, the Krauts are coming right there in the back alley. So we spread out. We had a .30 caliber machine gun left with us, but not much ammunition. That ain't gonna do us bit of good. Let's ditch it. So took the firing pin out of it, the bolt, and fired it as far as you could throw it, and buried the Tommy machine gun. We took up the position, the 6 of us, and I'm standing like a woodshed in the back alley. I'm standing on this corner, one of them new guys on this corner. Let's keep your eyes open. Pretty soon here come 2 of them Germans walking down my side of that building. I said to this kid, I said, I'm going to get that first one. You better take care of the second one. He said, what are you going to do? I'm going to fill him so full of lead, he went away at him. And them 2 Krauts come up with about a step at the corner, and turned and went back. And I went just like that. And then they kept going between us. When they got between us, the 3 of us come out like we was the whole army. We had everything smoking. We wound up with 9 Germans left. There were 12 of them. We take them out on the street, police them down, and we told these kids to keep their eyes open. There's got to be more someplace. So Bill Weir was the squad leader, and he and I had been together since the days in Toccoa. And we're policing these kids. They're kids, 16, 17-year-old kid. And one of them makes a run for it. I said, somebody better stop him. One of them new boys says, what are you supposed to do? I said, shoot and then holler halt. He said, that weren't the way we were trained. We're supposed to holler halt and then shoot. Now in this case, I said, you shoot and then holler halt. And he didn't miss it. He didn't hit him. Old Bill Weir says to me, Wilbur, I'm going to stop him. He's damn right, I'm going to stop him. I fired 1 shot. And that kid said, how can you do that? I'm going to tell you something right now. You better think of that. Do you want that to be you? If you don't, you better wake up right now. Because that kid would have shot you. So we're standing, what are we going to do with these people we got left? We don't want them. And if you remember the experience we had, when they were telling us about the French underground and the Dutch underground, in France they said there'd be all kinds of help. You didn't see no help. I didn't anyway. They said in Holland the Dutch underground was pretty well tore up. Might not get no help. but there was more Dutch people out there ready to help us than you could take a stick at. And they said, we'll take them crowds, be our guests. So what they did, I have no idea. We beat it. We got to get back to our own outfit. So we're coming along in the night, going back towards where we'd come from. That's it, the bill, the password's going to change at midnight. I wonder what we're supposed to do. Hope we're lucky, I guess. And we hit our own outfit after midnight. We finally made them understand who we were, and we got back to our own outfit then.
How were you able to make them understand that you were
Well,
Americans?
Asking questions. They'd ask questions, you try to fire answers at them. Try to give them an old password, you know. But they finally recognized us. But that was first great experience in Holland. Yeah.
Did you have any other interaction with the civilian population in Holland?
I never had much anymore, too much. But they were there to help. I believe it. They were there to help. They did help.
Now you mentioned that you went back and forth between Schindel and Beckel a couple of times.
We did, a couple of times.
And there were quite a few German tanks involved in that
Yeah,
operation.
yeah.
Share with us a little bit about those experiences.
Well, the only thing I can tell you is that we take Beckel, and you leave a small enough force to try to hold it. It wouldn't be big enough. They'd get driven out. Well, the time we take Beckel, then we'd have to go back and get Schindel again. And it was back and forth between them a couple times. I remember it was up in the railroad. We attacked it up a railroad track in the fields on both sides. And we'd get their Boffer guns fired at us. You hear them at 3 rounds, boom, boom, boom. And you swear you could reach up and catch them, you know, if you're laying on the ground. And a lot of guys was heading for the ditches on the side of the railroad track. So that's no place to be. They're going to have them zeroed in. Stay out in the field. And you'd be shoveling with your hands to get a trench to get into, you know, in the sand. But that's the way it went back and forth. There was a couple times that happened, but we held them both. Yeah. Then when we moved out to, well, it was outside the area where I got hit in the face then. And I think it was a sniper in a windmill that got me. But I don't think that sniper's living today either, because I think they blew that windmill down. Got the artillery on it. I'm not sure. I don't know if it's the windmill that they're talking about in this one story, that they're rebuilding it. I have no idea.
When you were involved in the battle that you were injured in, you'd actually kind of moved out of the canal grassy area, and you were in the sand dunes. Is that right?
Yes.
Share with us a little bit about your deployment and what you were involved in, what you were doing as you were wounded.
Well, at the time I was wounded, we were on a roadblock on a crossroad. And then we didn't have a machine gun, but 3 of us was rifled. And we spotted the German machine gun team coming up the road toward us. And I said, the guy on the right or on the left, you take the one on that side, the guy in the middle take the one in the middle, and I'll get the other one. And that's when I got zapped. As you can tell, I was looking this way, and that bullet hit me, went through me like that.
Did you go unconscious, or what happened?
No, just knocked me down. It didn't knock me out. It knocked me flat. And at that instant, I lined my whole family up. My mother, dad, the kids. Because I thought it had it.
And how did you get from there?
Walked to the aid station, which wasn't too far away. And when I got to the aid station, they operated on me right there. And so this face up, back of my neck.
And from there?
From there, I went to a hospital in England. I flew out of Brussels, Belgium on a C-47, made into a hospital ship. And flew back to England. Now, I don't remember where we landed in England, but I flew out of Brussels, Belgium, in this plane. I was in a hospital in Brussels for maybe overnight or something like that. And the Belgian people cleaned up the wound and brought in fresh fruit. I don't know where they got it to eat. and put us on the old C-47 that was the hospital ship, went back to England. But I don't remember where it landed. And I went back into a hospital. I don't know if it's the same hospital I was in originally, you know, but it was an American hospital.
And you were there for approximately,
Another 6 weeks.
and then sometime in the beginning of December, I guess?
I went back to my company and they were in Montmelon, France. Yeah.
And share with us what happened then.
Got back in time to help me run in to go to the Bulge.
Now, did you get 7 days furlough?
No.
Right if it, that was
No.
the previous thing, okay.
That was after Normandy.
Okay, so you got back in time for the Bulge. Do you remember what you were doing when you got the call to go?
To Bastogne. I don't remember what I was doing. I know we were going up a pretty short supply. So, some didn't even have a weapon. We went up there.
What were you carrying with you?
I carried an M1. That's an M1. Yep.
Other than weapon, can you share with me kind of what kind of gear you had when you went to Bastogne?
I had a winter outfit on, OD. I had an overcoat. I was lucky to have one of them. I had an overcoat yet. But we didn't have no galoshes, just a shoe. And that's about it. I don't even remember having a pair of gloves.
And how did you get there?
By truck. That was on an 18-wheeler.
So share with us, I guess you woke up that morning and they said, line up, we're moving out, man, and take the story
Morning,
on.
at night.
At night?
In the night. We'll be loading in 30 minutes or something. It was a mad scramble. We got on them, well, it was thick, all kinds of trucks, anything that carried them in. And I happened to be on an 18-wheeler. Probably about 40 of us on the back end of that thing. And no top on it. Going up there in the country, they'd stop. And when they'd stop, we'd get off and jump around and get your feet warmed up or something. And take a can of gasoline, dump it in the ditch, and take a match to it. Get warm for a little bit. This guy who was driving this truck I on was a colored guy, probably from the Transportation Corps. And we got up, and they were running convoy, and they tell them to run with the blackout lights. Them guys in that convoy were running with blackout lights, so they can't see nothing, and running with the headlights on. We got up there and got unloaded, and I said, we unloaded shooting. And this colored truck driver got mixed up with us. He said, give me a weapon, I'm going with you. But they wouldn't let him go. And he said, can't let you. You gotta get your truck back if you can. And he wanted to stay. We'd been glad to have him, I guess. And we got pretty cold, I'll tell you. We got cold. And I made squad leader after it. Bill Weir was killed in an attack up there in Bulge one day. We went in an attack, and he said, Wilbur, would you like to lead these men today? I said, I'd rather lead them than push them. And he got killed. And the man said, it's a 6 cents. And if you don't think a 6 cents works for you, it sure does. Sure did for him. He said, I got a funny feeling. And I said, he got shot. Yeah.
When you first arrived in Bastogne, you said you unloaded shooting.
Yeah.
Share with me the first 24 hours, your recollection of the first 24 hours.
No, I really can't. It was, I guess you say it was slugging it every minute. He was hoping to stop the crouch and push him back or something. But that's the way it was the first few days. Run and go, run and get. Yep.
Now, if I remember correctly from some of the books that I've read, those first days you were actually facing some armored divisions.
Mm-hmm.
So how do men with rifles and no weapons fight tanks?
I hope you got some mortars or something. And that's all you can bank on. Or he was good enough, get close enough to think you could cripple one, you'd see two charges. You stick on, you get on the belly of them. That happened. But that's the only way you can stop them. A mortar might, but pretty doubtful a mortar stop a tank. But if you catch a tank that was going up to the belly showed, that's a weak spot. If you was quick enough, fast enough, you can get a CO2 stuck to them and then blow them up.
Did you witness anyone actually doing that?
No, I didn't. But it's been done. Yep.
What were your thoughts about the second or third day into Bastogne after it had snowed and you weren't getting resupplied?
Wondered if I'd ever see home again. We ate the cow or something that we could make the meal out of, but it was butchered. Had a guy in my squadron in the platoon who could wrestle up a pretty good meal if you could get him stuff and do it with. So we killed some cows or a pig or something if he dared to build a fire. But one of the most interesting things is we got a new platoon leader come to us in the Balls. And this is before Bill Weir was killed. And when they told us we was going to get a new first lieutenant for platoon leader fresh from the States, we thought, oh my God, somebody's going to want to go by the book. Well, this guy was a Texan. And if I remember right, his name was Lowell H. Smith. And when he come to us and reported he had a pearl handle 45 on both, one on each side. We thought, wow. But that man was introduced to all the non-com, and the first thing he said to us, he says, you fellas show me what to do for a couple of days and then I'll help you. Turned out to be one of the best officers I ever met. He and I went on a patrol out in no man's land one day. We're looking for something to eat. So Wilbur, let's you and me go on a patrol. There might be something in some of them buildings in that town that we can eat. So we grabbed 2 or 3 musette bags and away we go. We get into that town, get down in the basement, and you can't believe the stuff we found. Butter and canned stuff. And we had all we could carry when we went back. And going back, we went by some buildings and there was some couple of rabbits. Big rabbits, tame rabbits. And I said to the lieutenant, them fellows are just about ready to eat. Let's take them back with us. Get dark, we'll butcher them, have us some fried rabbit. So we did. And we waited the next day and thought, well, we'd kill them rabbits. Went back and we penned them up where we were. We were building in a little house. And somebody else got them. I guess. They were gone anyway. But around this house, there were some chickens running around, big rooster. This lieutenant says, yeah, that rooster would make awful good eating. Shrapnel could get them. Looking at him, but I throw it to that rooster, you know. That'd be a glass jar laying there in the weeds or something. I picked it up and fired it at that rooster. Hey, Lieutenant Shrapnel just got the rooster. He did, he cleaned it. We built a fire right now. And in this house, in the kitchen part, we cut a hole in the floor. There was a cellar under that house, big enough we could dive into if it got chilled. And we built a fire right then, frying that rabbit. And it must be the kraut spotted our smoke and fire from the stack in that chimney. And we started getting shelled. So we dive for the cellar, the shelling quits, and we come back up and the rabbits burned up on the stove.
But you ate it anyway, right?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Can you explain to us a little bit about how you go on a reconnaissance patrol and how you do it in the snow without being detected?
Well, one I remember particularly went on, I picked a guy to go with me. I could pick who I'd ask for volunteers. But we had a guy, he was part Indian. I went to him when I said, "Hal, would you like to go on a patrol with me?" God, he'd love to. I said, you got a pistol? He said, no. Well, I'll get you one then. I'll take one off of somebody else, squad or something. So we got a pistol, and I said, 3 or 4 hand grenades and no helmet. We don't want that helmet on. The scraping and brush and stuff like that. And we were supposed to make contact with an armored outfit. It wasn't supposed to be maybe 500 or 600 yards from where we were. This kid and I walked, then we walked, then we walked, then we walked. Probably an hour and a half. Never saw a soul. And all at once, out of the blue, somebody hollered, halt. And there's 2 troopers who buried themselves in the snow right now. And I had the pins pulled on the grenade. They give him the password, and the guy answered the password. It was this armored outfit. And I put the guy on guard. And he says, I said, where was you guys? Haven't you supposed to have an outpost out somewhere up in north or south of wherever we are? He said, we do have. I said, you do? I said, you're the first guy we've seen in an hour and a half. He says, you haven't seen nobody? No, not a soul. He says, the Krauts just drove off 6 of our half-tracks. He says, you guys are wide awake, ain't you? He says, well, we're going to head back. He says, how are you going? I said, the same way we came. Follow our footsteps back the same way. We get back to, when we start back, I said, this name was Tom. Well, it's Tom. I'm going to lead. You stay just close enough you can see me. We might run into some trouble. And we started back and we're walking. We get probably within 500 feet, a yard of our own outfit. Somebody hollered, halt. Well, I disappeared in the snow. The hand grenade pin pulled. And I asked this guy the password to give it to me. I said, where were you about 2 hours ago? I said, right here. You weren't here 2 hours ago. If you were, you were sleeping. He said, well, maybe my buddy was supposed to be watching and went to sleep. So I'm going to tell you something. One of you better keep your eyes open. Because the Krauts just drove off 6 of your half-tracks. So you better stay awake. And you could wake up and your throat's cut. We went on back to company, reported what we found. They wound it up. That's the way 2-man patrol worked.
Tell me about your combat patrol experience.
This combat patrol, we were supposed to go out to check for a bridge somewhere out in front of us, no man's land. And so it took 6 men. And one of them men you designated as a getaway man. In other words, if we run into something we don't think we can handle, he can get away and get some help. And we were going up to this bridge. I don't remember the location of it. And all at once we run into some troops. Look American. They got American uniforms on. But I thought, I said something about the bridge. Oh, it says it's still there. And I thought, you don't see MPs up that far in the front. And you don't see infantry people that's not even in this part of the country, or medics, or an artillery unit. That's their uniform, mixed. So we chatted with them a few minutes. You thought they were Americans, they sounded it. So I said, okay, boys, let's turn around and go back. We get out of sight of them guys. I says, you guys notice anything different about them? Not really. I said, they're not American. They've got to be German. He said, how can you tell? He said, look at their uniforms. How many different insignias did you see? You wouldn't see an outfit mixed up like that. So we went back and got more help. And went back and took care of them. Captured some of them. And they wound that session up. But the bridge is still there. I don't know if they ever used it or not.
After you captured them, did they admit to being Germans? Do you know?
Did they what?
After you captured them, did they admit to being Germans?
No, but they had German uniforms under the American ones.
All right, we're kind of getting close to the end here.
Yeah.
What time is our barbecue thing?
4:30.
All right, Wilbur, you were sharing with us a little bit about Bastogne. One of the questions I would like to ask you about is, can you share with us a little bit about your living conditions, where you, if you slept, and if you did, thanks for that answer.
Most of it we slept was in a foxhole. Foxhole or just plain on the ground. And pretty much you tried to have a foxhole if you got a chance to take a nap. But sometimes you went to sleep for quite a long time. But
How long is quite a long time?
I've been 24 hours or longer without sleep. But that's the only way we slept was either in the foxhole, but some of the time we managed to get into buildings, the local natives' houses, one thing or another. But otherwise, he was right out in the open. But I'd say it's, some of the guys when we were sleeping was saying it was right in the foxhole. And the men I had in my squad, I said, if we get a chance to rest at night, don't take your shoes off, because you won't get them on in the morning. Feet swell up from the cold. And they said, well, how are we going to rest our feet? Just loosen the shoelaces. And if they carried extra socks, you change socks every day if you could. In myself, I carried about 6 pair of extra socks around my waistband and my underclothes, and just change them every day. At least they might not get dry, but at least they'd be warm for a little while. But I've seen guys that took their shoes off, they have to get up and run in the morning, couldn't get them back on. And that's tough running in snow in your stocking feet. But that's the way we slept. You got a chance. Yeah.
Can you kind of describe for me the size of a foxhole? Did you have a covering over it?
Most of them you could get 2 men in. And if we had lucky, we had covers over. And we used candles to try to heat the place a little bit. Just sit inside them foxholes. And most of the time we had a lot of them we covered with timber and brush and whatever to protect us from the tree bursts and like that.
So were most of the foxholes in a wooded area? Or
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much somewhere in a wood, tree line someplace in the woods, yeah, yeah.
And as far as your clothing went, did you ever, I know you went in with you said you had a trench coat or something. Did you ever receive any supplies of gloves or?
No, never. Didn't get no gloves. And some might have been lucky enough to have a pair of gloves with them when we went up there, but I didn't have. But, so a lot of people didn't even have I had one of the big wool overcoats, which helped some. When the daytime it would thaw up and get wet, at night you could sit down and use it for a stool because the bottom would freeze. They didn't take it off, you kept it on. You could almost use it just for a stool to sit on.
I'm assuming that typical overcoat was green.
Yeah, OD color.
Olive drab.
Yeah.
How would you camouflage yourself from the enemy?
Well, this was brush. Maybe if we could find a sheet in the farmhouse up there and tear it up, make a cape out of it or something for white. But that's the only way you had to do any camouflaging, just what was natural. So, but it was kind of tough to keep camouflaging, you know, to keep from being seen or something. So that's the only way you could, is if you had something you could get that was white, would help some. That's what the Germans was using, white clothing. But we didn't, we just had to make shift.
Do you have any recollections of actually seeing, other than at the bridge where they were dressed in American uniforms, did you have any recollection of actually seeing enemy soldiers, or was it mainly artillery that you were fighting against?
We saw enemy soldiers, foot soldiers, yeah, we did. And the artillery, but the artillery we couldn't do much about. But if we had artillery units with us, well, then they could fire at the enemy. But we saw a lot of enemy in front of you, so, yep.
And can you just kind of set the stage for me, explain, you know, was it a guy running behind a tree, or were they 200 yards off in the distance, or 50 feet in front of you?
They'd probably, well, anywhere from 100 yards up in front of you. You might see them moving in the woods or in the mostly pine woods. And it was pretty tough to see because they're evergreen. I remember one day that we went into an attack. I had 3 men left in the squad. And the platoon leader said, "Sergeant, you got your scout out?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Who is it?" I said, "Me." He said, "You got your machine gunners out too?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Who is it?" I said, "Me." He said, "What's the other 3 guys doing?" I said, "Carrying ammunition." He said, "Okay." So we made the attack and come out all right. We won the battle, but that's the way you went. You had to improvise. You didn't just tell a guy if he's a machine gunner he's going to be running a machine gun. But we made out all right. The worst thing was tree burst and mortar fire. It didn't matter where you were, you couldn't get away from it, even in a foxhole. But I saw a guy go berserk up there in Bolton one day in a shelling. He went wild. And we started running around. I thought, boy, somebody's got him, get him down or he's going to get plastered. But he'd been already cut up a little bit, nothing serious. And you know, it took 5 of us to put that man on the ground. He was, gone crazy. And we just hollered for the medics with a straitjacket. And they come and got him, and whatever happened to him, I have no idea. But that's a bad day yet.
You had mentioned going in on the attack. Was that when you moved from the defensive to the offensive and went into the Beaujolais woods?
Well, I don't remember where it was, but there were so many places we went in attacks and have to withdraw that you never know where real location where he was at. Just a bunch of wood, so you got kind of nasty at times. I sat on an outpost one night with 2 of us on a railroad track. This railroad track went through a cut, and the Germans was moving in on the other side of that railroad. We could hear them moving in equipment all night long and hear them talking. And we were told to come back at daylight to the company CP. In our line of defense, we had machine guns set up, all kinds. You could lay down and stretch out your arm, hit a machine gun on each side of you. So at daylight, we had to pull back. I told the CO, we're in for trouble, because them Krauts have been moving in artillery or armor all night. And he said, "Will you take somebody back out there where you were on outpost to keep your eyes open?" I said, "Yeah." So we picked a couple more guys to go out, spend the day if had to. And when we went back out, so I'd take them out where I was, I told the guys on the machine gun leave off its path to get back through if something happened. And that something happened. Them Krauts started coming, and I told them 2 guys to beat it. And I went to fire a hand grenade. And I said, I figure you got back, I'm coming. And I said, tell them guys to open up with a machine gun and leave me a path to get back. And with the machine gun, we had, particularly the 50s, we stopped the Krauts. They didn't come across the railroad track with their equipment, and they probably had run overs that they had. When we stopped them, and then we withdrew to another line of defense. And that's the way you fought. But, battle cry with Geronimo actually was hit and run. That's what you hit and get. And that's the way you fought about. Give them all you got for a few minutes, then beat it.
Did you ever have an instance where you captured any of the enemy?
No, I never did. No. The only time I had anything to do with capturing someone was in Holland that I told you about when in the Holland invasion.
The young kids,
Young
the
kids.
16-year-olds.
Yeah.
Can you show us a little bit about what you saw of the resupply planes, the C-47s, and then the Halifax?
Yeah. When the weather cleared, so the Air Force could fly, the fighter pilots started dropping bombs. So to start with, and we tell them to drop bombs. They're dropping 500-pounders. And then pilots would say, we're too close to you. Drop them. And we'd give them had an artillery observer with us, and we'd spot a tank and tell them to drop some bombs on them. And these pilots, you could hear them talking through this forward observer's radio. He said, we're too close. He said, these boys said, drop them. We might bounce a little bit, but you can stop them tanks. Well, then they tried to resupply with C-47, getting shot out of the sky. Well, the next time they come in with Halifax bombers. And them guys are going just like this. And he said there was gun barrels sticking out all over them. And no fighter plane bothered them. That's when we got supplied. The rest of the time, what C-47 did get dropped, the Germans got. But we did get the one stuff that the Halifax bombers dropped. We get ammunition and food, and K rations or something, you know. English rations weren't too good. They kept you from starving to death. So, but that's the resupply. And of course, when the patent got through to us, and the supplies would come in by truck or whatever, until we were relieved up there. So,
You'd also mentioned to me that I believe you said perhaps you saw the Germans when they came in to make the offer for the Americans to surrender.
did.
Will you share that story with me, all that you saw?
all I saw was these guys come in waving a white flag. I wasn't that close to them, but I was where I could see them. And they wondered what they were up to, because that, you figured it meant their surrender. Well, they weren't trying to get us to surrender. And they give us 2 hours to give them an answer. And our general, actually the general, McAuliffe wasn't the one that said nuts. It's one of his staff that actually said it, but it's never been seen. And of course the Germans wanted to know what that meant. He says, "Plain go to hell." And this German officer says, "We'll hit you with 2 or 3 armored divisions and 2 or 3 infantry divisions." We said, "And poor cusses." And then they hit us too. But the thing that they weren't too smart about operating, they didn't want to try to make a breakthrough in one place. And they said if they tried to make a breakthrough in 2 places, we'd been in trouble. Because they'd make a breakthrough in one place, then they'd withdraw and make another one, in another, and we'd be there to face them. Somebody from the 101. And the story later tells you this, they'd hit in 2 places at once, they probably could have took us out. But they didn't smarten up to that. One thing I'll say about the German and ours, our soldiers were taught to fight individually. A German soldier, if you're non-combatant, he says, you take that gun until there's nobody left. That's what they did. They didn't act for themselves. Now, if we run into a machine gun nest, we got guys going both ways to try to get around it. And maybe 2 or 3 guys keeping them pinned down. But they didn't fight that way. They come up to you, had a pile in front of you.
Was the Battle of Bastogne, is there any way that you could describe that differently than other battles, such as in Holland and Normandy?
And, Scott, I think the only difference would be the weather, the temperature. It was so cold. That was probably the only difference. Otherwise, the fighting was practically the same. Anyway, Normandy or Holland, but hedgerows in Holland, in Normandy were tough. But otherwise, the fighting didn't change that much. Just the cold weather. Yep.
Did you have any interaction with the civilian population in Bastogne?
Not very much, no. Not very much, very little. They'd all scurried to someplace else or got out of that part of the area. That's...
All right, and share with us, after the fighting had concluded in Bastogne, what happened next?
We were put on trucks to head back for Reims, France. and they just traveled in the daylight. And we probably got left Bastogne in them trucks, I don't know, might have been the middle of the day. And they traveled till dark. And we pulled into a farm area, farmyard or someplace. A lot of them all had stone walls around their farm building. They told us to get off in trucks and get in the barn or get somewhere where you could keep warm. Then they go on the next day. And that never happened. We were about 30 minutes and on them trucks we're heading south. He said, where are we going? He says, Alsace-Lorraine. He said, the Germans had threatened a breakthrough and we're the only thing you got left to stop them. I said, yeah, how much? We ain't got no men. No ammunition. They said the ammunition will be there when you get there. Well, it was, but the men weren't. Until we'd been down there we sat on defense on that Motor River probably for about 30 days. And we just sat on defense. And we get Germans would fire mortar rounds around that at us. And the ours would fire some back. And they threatened to, figured it might get a breakthrough one night. They tried to come through at another sector to my left, and but they stopped them. They had maybe 1 or 2 men got wounded. And that's the last actual combat was other than on defense. The only thing that at night I would hear an engine running over in the German side in the woods. You know.
Hold on a second. Okay, Mr. Ingalls.
But they'd hear this sound like a little engine of some kind running. And I wondered if the crowd's got an electric generator or something. And I said to my CO, I said, I'd like to run a reconnaissance, find out what they got running. He said, you're not going. We're going to be getting out of here in a little while. Oh, okay. So after that experience, when I got home and out of service, and chainsaws were introduced in this country, I said, that's what I heard running. Because the Germans had chainsaws before we did. And I think that's what we heard running.
Now, you had shared with us before we were recording yesterday something about acquiring a .50 caliber.
That I acquired when we were down on the Motor River.
Introduce the subject for us, because I think it was, you felt like you didn't have enough
I said
firepower.
we didn't have enough firepower for the men we had. And
What was that?
I said we didn't have enough firepower for the men we had. And I only had 4 in my squad, and so I said, 2 of the guys one night, come on, we're going after a machine gun. Where are you going to get the machine gun? I'm going to steal one off an American tank. I said, all I want is the 50. The tripod I don't want, because I can't carry it. And I said, I'll carry the 50 caliber gun. And you guys, if you can carry 2 cans of ammunition, 50 caliber, grab them. Well, I don't know if you ever picked up a can of 50 caliber ammunition. They're heavy. And we got the machine gun. And I set it up in a foxhole on the bank of the Motor River where we were, and covered it. And I says, we blocked it up for a mount on logs and timbers and stuff. I says, if that has to be fired, I'll do the firing. And it didn't happen. When we got replacements, and I got 6 new men in the squad. We was up there down there on that river. And called to the CP to come up and get them taken to my squad area. And Scott, it was so black that night you couldn't see your hand in front of you. But I got to the CP and grabbed these 6 replacements. And I says, I'm leading. You get a hold of my belt, and each one of you the other end. Don't let go. And I'll take you back to the squad area. And they were trotting down through the woods, and he says, how do you know where you're going? You see that treetop over there and that one over there? That's how I'm going, landmarks. And we get down to my squad area, and I said, now you guys get on your hands and knees and crawl. If you fall in a foxhole, stay there till it gets daylight, if we can. And that's what we did. And the next day at daylight, I tried to pair them up with a vet when they saw me in combat. And we sat there joking and talking, and we got a shelling one night after they got there, the worst shelling that I had ever been in. In the German stuff, I wasn't worried about. that was going over our heads, but the American stuff was just walking up and down that river. And I was afraid to shut around. They scared me more than the German stuff. When I knocked out our communication with the company CP, and the next morning, I walked back through the woods to the company CP, traced our phone line, and there were shells from that side to that side that hadn't gone off. Dud. And I said, boy, nobody got hurt. Just kept us awake for a couple hours. And then we finally got relieved, went out of there, went back to Reims, France.
Now, when you were first initially deployed to Alsace-Lorraine, were you in a city setting, or were you out in the country?
We were out in the country. We were out in the country on that motor, what they call the Motor River. Okay. The water itself in that river was much wider than this room, but the land across probably the opening was 300-400 yards between the two sides. Yeah.
Did you ever go on any reconnaissance patrols across the river?
No.
The other thing that I'm curious about is, I understand that you could take a .50 caliber off a tank, but I would think that the armored personnel would be interested in keeping that gun.
You would, but where were they? You had to be sleeping or something. They wouldn't have been running a tank without their 50 on the top. So what they did, I don't know. When I left there, the 50 was still there in that hole.
Did you get in trouble a lot as a kid?
No.
Because you were really sneaky, weren't you?
Yeah. Clever Yankee. I call it Yankee ingenuity.
Okay, so you left Alsace-Lorraine.
And went to Reims, France. Yeah. And we were in Reims, France in time for the VE Day parade on May the 8th, 1945. And my company, or what was left of them, was the only airborne outfit that paraded in that parade. And there was probably, well, maybe 6 or 7 of us were original Tacoma people. The rest was all replacement set and everything. I was one of the older men. We had one officer that was a Tacoma man, and the rest were either non-coms or PFCs. They were original Tacoma people. And from then on, well, the 501 was disbanded in, well, in maybe September of '45. And I went to the 502, but before that, we hadn't jumped since September 1944. They come out and said, if you want to keep your jump pay, we got to jump. Our jump pay, we were supposed to jump at least once a month in parachute status. And they says you can go up and jump with nothing but the parachute. And a lot of guys refused to jump. I said, I'm going to jump. I'm going to keep that $50 a month. And went up, made a jump with no equipment on. Beautiful. And that, then I'd say they disbanded, deactivated the 501 in Europe. And I went, we went to, they split us up and went to the 506, the 502, and the artillery regiment in the 101. And I wound up in the 502, and the rest of my stay in Europe. And I got to finally go home in November of 1945.
And I think we covered some of the demolitions training that you had with the 502 yesterday.
Yeah.
Did you make it down into the Berchtesgaden area?
I was there, yeah.
Share with us a little bit about what you saw there.
The thing I saw was where the German barracks and stuff was in Berchtesgaden, in the lake, in the village. And after the war, I flew on advanced detail for police duty from Reims, France to Salzburg, Germany, with about 30 of us. And we were going from town to town in Austria to make sure the Germans realized that the war was over. And that's when I saw Berchtesgaden, Zellamsee, and I don't know how many other Austrian villages. It was beautiful. Just,
Explain what was involved in informing the civilian population, or the Germans, that the war was over.
just making sure that they understood that the war was done with. They could go home. And I suppose they probably did.
Were you interacting with the civilians or with the soldiers?
You know, you had the civilians too afterwards. You had to talk to civilians, and so they knew that the war was over, and they could go about their business.
Did you run into any problems during?
No, no, nothing.
I've heard stories of, I guess maybe it was your group would have to come in and collect up all the weapons.
Yeah, yeah.
Was that part of your detail?
No, I didn't do any weapon collecting, just to be sure to notify them that they'd say the war was over. What they did with the weapons, I didn't care. No.
Well, would you mind sharing with us, kind of in conclusion, a little bit about the lessons you think you've learned from those experiences that my generation and future generations should be aware of?
I really don't know how I would answer that. A lot of times the soldiers wondered if you got the people that would be the same as we were, working together. But I'm sure they got to be. You know, you wouldn't have an army. But that's what you always wonder, if the troops are staying caliber now as back then. But I think they are. I think they are. But their tactics, of course, their parachutes are jumping today are a lot different than what we use. You can land on a dime with it. What they got today with ours, you'd have a whole field full of dimes you'd be lucky to land on.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
No, I guess not. I'm pretty well covered.
Any questions that you'd like to ask?
No.
Okay. Well, it sounds like they've started the vacuum, so I guess it means it's time to stop. Thank you very much.
You okay?
Called the Edelweiss.